Let me be honest, this book isn't propelled by any urge. I'm not a media critic. I just love Stranger Things. Before its creation, I was fond of referring to the X-Files as the television event of my lifetime. I'd been forced to change my thinking. I now say that the X-Files was the television event of my childhood. That's anachronistic, of course. Stranger Things debuted well after the X-Files, and it's been a long time since I was a kid. But that's my point. Stranger Things takes me back to my childhood. The nostalgia that the show so skillfully cultivates seduces fans of the show who are my age. I see myself and my gang of friends in the characters. I relive the nerdy things we did my middle and high school years with the 70s and 80s. My own kids talk about Stranger Things as though it was part of their own fondly remembered past. That's fine with me. They could be Googling worse things than what life was like in the 80s. A lot about the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana, and its middle school reminds me of growing up. When I watch the show, I can see old neighborhoods and the store where we bought baseball cards, the kind that came with chewing gum. That was essentially sliced granite. I relive the bike rides to school and my friends' houses. I can pick out middle school friends and acquaintances, nerds, jocks, and the troubled bullies who spent most of their time in detention. Our school had an AV club. Most of the guys I hung out with had single parents, and I remember just about all of the movies that the series famously repurposes in weaving its earthy but ethereal tale of, well, the strange things going on in town. Stranger Things offers just sort of terrifying but exhilarating adventure I would have wanted to get drawn into. Turns out I was, and am, in that kind of adventure. None of us are. I'm talking about the paranormal conflict the Bible describes for the soul of every man, woman, and child, that raging beyond what our senses can detect. Demogorgons and shadow monsters on the other side of a supernatural upside down seek our misery and destruction. As viewers diss us immediately in Stranger Things, ignorance of or resistance to the mind-bending otherworldly manifestations doesn't make them untrue. Many Christians resist or feel uneasy with the supernatural worldview of the Bible. I've written a good deal about the unseen realm and its place in the biblical worldview. My goal has been to help people rediscover the Bible for what it is, a supernatural epic, and to stop reading it like it's a textbook. I've tried to convince people that the content of the Bible is either presented as story or framed by story, and that the Bible's story is inescapably supernatural. That might sound odd. Why would Bible readers need to be convinced of such things? After all, many people who devote time to reading the Bible believe in God, Jesus, Satan, angels, and demons. While that's the case, the observation misses the point. There's a lot more going on in the Bible in the supernatural realm than these familiar figures. The Bible's supernatural intersection of an animate, spiritual world with the terrestrial human reality transcends what you would typically hear in church. The gospel isn't as dull as we make it. When Bible scholars talk about the gospel, it's usually in a dialect of academies. We point out that the Greek term translated gospel euangelion means good news. The good news refers to how Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection are the basis for the forgiveness of our sins and everlasting life for all who trust in that message. And the gospel really is good news, because we all sin. Psalm 323, and without the gospel will not have everlasting life in God's presence. Psalm 623, John 3:16. We have to be made acceptable to God. That's what the cross accomplished, if we will only believe it. Psalm 56-8f 28-9. But that's just a definition. You could put it on an index card and memorize it for a Bible doctrine course. It's like reading a synopsis of Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings instead of reading that would be at home on an FAQ webpage. God forgave them and eventually got around to choosing Israel to be his own people, and his followers preached that message throughout the world. That's what we're supposed to do too. There you go. Something else to put on an index card or two, but doesn't give you any sense of the supernatural conflict that is running in the background on nearly every page of the Bible. and which takes center stage in a lot of its scenes. It's good that we encounter the fact that the cross is the sole means of salvation for us all. On the other hand, it's kind of dull. It's bookish, to be blunt. Class is in session, stay awake, because there may be a quiz when we're done. It presents nothing that captures the imagination. That is what well-told stories do. The gospel story in its supernatural context. God already had a supernatural family, and I'm not talking about the Trinity. God already had children. These sons of God were spectators when he laid the foundations of the world. Job 384:7. God's supernatural children were also his audience at the moment described in Genesis 126. They didn't need the information. They are co-eternal and co-omniscient, telling his celestial children, let's have more children in our family. He was the only one who did the creating. So God created humankind in his image. In the likeness of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Gen 127 Leb. None was capable of having a relationship with him. Plants, animals, bacteria, etc. couldn't converse with God, share thoughts with God, or express love and appreciation to God. God decided to change that circumstance. He made creatures with whom he could commune and interact, intellectually and spiritually, and who could also partner with him, and free will with these new creatures. Humanity, they couldn't come to him, and so God took up residence on earth, in a garden called Eden. Earth's first human couple sinned against God, but what God wanted wasn't what he wanted. God's vision for a human would grow up in a broken home in a deadly. The subplot of evil in the biblical story proceeds on multiple fronts. The threat to humanity has not been eliminated. To other rebellions by the heavenly sons of God. Gen 61:4. Doi 328. The Ayla reader senses there's an unseen black, demonic Hydra watch, his visitation of Abraham. A lone stream of light penetrating the thickening darkness would lead to the birth of the one and daughters of earth in the fullness of time. Gal 315-16, 26-9, 446. It's no accident, then, that the coming of Jesus was referred to as good news in the New Testament. It's also no accident that, in addition to presenting what happened on the cross as the exclusive means of God's forgiveness, an everlasting life in God's family, John 316,146. It is also cast as the decisive defeat of the powers of darkness. In other words, there's a reason why, when Paul talks about the resurrection, he links it to the end of authority of the supernatural rulers and powers in control of the nations. Rom 837-39, EPH 120-31, Pet 322. As I've chronicled in other books, there are dozens of passages in the Bible that frame everything from geography to baptism in terms of supernatural warfare. The story of the gospel, framed by a supernatural worldview. The same is true of Stranger Things. Though the series is not driven by theology, its plotline is propelled by the looming threat of a malevolent, otherworldly intelligence that seeks the destruction of all that the characters hold dear. I'm not going to make an argument that the hit series is about the biblical storyline or follows it in any deliberate way. It doesn't. Rather, I want readers to discern that there is a lot of material in Stranger Things that is analogous to the Bible's long story of God's desire for a human family and of the supernatural agents bent on its failure or fulfillment. The good news and Stranger Things. As the Bible's story unfolds, it becomes clear that it is propelled by God's love, shown in his unstoppable pursuit of a human family. Family is also at the heart of Stranger Things. From Eleven's forlorn, isolated existence, to the relentless search for Will, to Hopper's tragic loss, every character in the show yearns for the companionship and love that secure family relationships bring. The Demogorgon and the unearthly overlord of the Upside Down aim to destroy the characters and their solidarity through literal violence or imperceptible deception and manipulation. Yet these same threats draw the heroes together because they cannot defeat evil by themselves. At the center of the clash is an opposing power, resident in the most unlikely source, brought to the fore by abuse, whose blood is a sign of healing, protection, and deliverance. This paragraph should alert anyone who is vaguely familiar with the story of salvation through Jesus to the similarities between the Gospel and Stranger Things. At the end of season 11 conquered the horrific Demogorgon and saved her friends, but at a very high cost. She had disappeared into the Upside Down, the realm of death. Hawkins was safe, but all was not well. Mobius had been infected by the pathogenic Upside Down. Something even more sinister loomed on the horizon. Understandably, season 2 opened with the kids in the party, resigned to the loss of 11. Except for Mike, his love for her kept his faith alive. Viewers knew that 11 had already escaped the Upside Down, but she had returned to a world where her friends were in lethal danger. A cancerous malignancy was spreading through Hawkins, rotting the very ground under the town. The shadow monster would possess and manipulate or to lead a newly spawned hive mind horde of demodogs to destroy everyone 11 had saved. She had escaped death, but her ability to rescue her friends was now impeded by Hopper's resistance. Born of his fear at the prospect of another terrible loss, he lacked faith in her character and power. She would leave and return in a different, yet the same, form to overpower darkness once more. Those familiar with the story of Jesus know that the story doesn't end with the cross. Initially, the loss of Jesus plunged his friends and followers into deep depression. They believed their dream of the Messiah, finally come, was over, but Jesus rose from the tomb, escaping the grip of death. The cross and resurrection brought forgiveness of sin and the promise of everlasting life for those who believe. When he rose from the dead, Jesus returned to a world still permeated with the contagion of sin, Satan's claim on the souls of humanity, and the ruling authority of the powers of darkness had been nullified. But these events were only the inauguration of a long struggle against cosmic opposition. The powers of darkness refused to surrender. The followers of Jesus, tasked with taking the message of the gospel to the world, would soon be under siege. He would leave but return as the Spirit, yet still be distinct from the Spirit. Acts 166-7, Phil 119-1, Pet 111, Gal 46-2, Core 317-18. The Spirit would be an ever-present helper. John 14:16 to combat depravity. G4 Gal 516. Resist the dark cosmic powers F612 and protect them from the one who sought to devour them. 1 Pet 58. Where 2 or 3 were gathered, he would be there in their midst. Matt 18:20. His presence was sufficient if they would believe. Even the end of season 2 resonates with the New Testament story. The hellish gate had been closed, but all is still not well in Hawkins. The final scene of the second season of Stranger Things leaves viewers with the assurance that 11 would be there for those who need her, present in their midst. But that didn't mean safety and security. The shadow monster had been defeated, not destroyed, and his designs were undeterred. Strange expectations. Stranger Things doesn't intentionally retell the gospel story. The Duffer Brothers, the show's creators, had nothing of that sort in mind. But the fact that the story has so many points of analogy to the saga of Jesus and his followers against the powers of darkness isn't coincidental. Truth often works off the radar. The story of God's love for us contains all the compelling archetypal elements and questions that have fueled human contemplation and tapped into its deepest yearnings for millennia. Is there a God who made us and loves us? Did this God have a purpose, his destiny in mind for us? Is there life after death? Conversely, is there otherworldly threats to our welfare? Why is there end? Can evil be overcome? Mythic genres like fantasy and science fiction allow storytellers to play off the supernatural and utopian impulses of their readers, consciously or unconsciously. Stranger Things does this exceedingly well. As for the gospel, we should not be surprised that, recollecting a conversation with J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson, C.S. Lewis was led to faith by the realization that the story of Christ is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference that it really happened. Stranger Things taps into spiritual questions and crises and addresses them the way the gospel story does, with mystery and transcendent power, justice, and love. The goal of this book is to discern elements of Stranger Things that make us think about the story of Jesus, and which draw attention to God's salvation plan. For those familiar with the New Testament story of Jesus, will see in the pages that follow that the show offers compelling, imaginative portrayals of important spiritual truths for others.